6 days until the 2008 presidential election, at which time, apparently, if Fox News has anything to say about the outcome, Rudolph Giuliani will be the next president of the United States. Our fifth story on the countdown, that Fox News channel would be pulling for the Republican nominee, whoever that might be, is a given. That executives at News Corporation have allegedly been working to suborn perjury to protect the candidacy of one individual, Mr. Giuliani, a close friend of Roger Ailes, the head of Fox News, would be monumentally inappropriate, even for Fox. David Schuster and Giuliani biographer Wayne Barrett in a moment. Day 2 of the Judith Regan lawsuit, in which the former News Corp publishing executive and former Fox News host says a senior executive at News Corp encouraged her to lie to federal investigators about her affair with Bernard Kerik, then the Homeland Security Secretary nominee, in order to protect the presidential aspirations of his mentor, Mr. Giuliani. Her lawyers telling the New York Times yesterday that Ms. Regan has proof. Would secret tapes of her phone calls and meetings be enough of a smoking gun? New York Daily News columnists George Rush and Joanna Malloy having reported back in July that Ms. Regan had secret tape recordings of her conversations with Fox executives, tapes that could, quote, not only bolster her position against News Corp, but may prove damning to more than a few Fox executives, according to one source who characterized the tapes as juicy. The suit itself does not name any executives nor offer details to support Ms. Regan's claims. But the civil complaint, 75 pages in all, filed with the state Supreme Court in Manhattan yesterday, is a fact. The other fact, that she is seeking compensatory damages of no less than $100 million, not easily dismissed. The story given added weight by breaking last night on the website of the paper of record, the New York Times, before being published on its front page this morning. But on the campaign trail in Iowa this morning, instead of addressing any of the facts in the story, candidate Giuliani was hoping to dismiss the entire thing as nothing more than small talk.
I don't respond to the story at all. I don't know anything about it, and it sounds to me like a kind of a gossip column story, more than a real story.
Last question.
Again, I think that's a gossip column story. Last thing in the world you want to do when you're running for president is respond to gossip column type stories.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was a yes, no. Let's turn now to our Washington correspondent, David Schuster, who we mentioned in the interest of full disclosure used to work for Fox News. David, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
The indictment of Bernard Kerik, that will soon obviously lead to the trial of Bernard Kerik. Regan's lawyer says she has evidence to back up her claims. What could be those, those juicy tapes of her conversations with Fox executives, if not evidence of what she's claiming? Giuliani here tries to dismiss the story as gossip today, didn't deny it, didn't address any component of it. Is that his best strategy right now?
Well, it may be in the short term, Keith, but in the long term, and again, we're talking maybe just a matter of weeks, as Judith Regan releases more information, releases details from these tapes, as the hearings start, as the depositions begin, we're going to learn a lot more about Bernie Kerik's affair with Judy Regan. We're going to learn a lot more about Bernie Kerik's shady financial deals. We're going to learn more about his business partnership with Rudy Giuliani. And all of this is going to serve to add even more pressure on Rudy Giuliani to give a yes or no answer. What did you know? Did you know about the affair that Bernie Kerik was having with Judith Regan or not? It was not a gossip story when Giuliani chose to make Bernie Kerik the commissioner of the New York City Police Department. It was not a gossip story when he chose to go into business partnership with Bernie Kerik. It was not a gossip story when he decided that Bernie Kerik ought to be the Homeland Security Director, and he pushed the White House to do that. And because of all this, Keith, and because of the dribs and drabs that are going to keep coming out, the questions are going to keep coming.
I think we see the timeline on this, David. That New York Daily News mentioned in the gossip columns in July was the shot across the bow from Regan to News Corp. They didn't settle with her, so she goes public yesterday. She's not likely to go away. And even if they were to settle this thing now, those allegations might linger, and if there are any doubts about that, you could ask Bill O'Reilly about Andrea Macris. Yeah. Is there any way to assess whether the story will actually impact the Giuliani campaign?
Well, listening to Giuliani campaign supporters, it has already had an impact. We had a supporter expressing great frustration to us tonight, Keith, that now you have the second news cycle in a week in which voters are being reminded that the guy that Rudy Giuliani recommended be the Director of National Security, Homeland Security, this was a guy who allegedly hid $500,000 from the IRS, allegedly concealed a links of a company to the mob, allegedly lied to investigators. And now with Regan's lawsuit, voters are reminded that this is the same guy, Bernie Kerik, who was carrying on an affair at an apartment in Lower Manhattan that was supposed to be reserved for 9/11 rescue workers who needed a break from the pit. And the big problem Giuliani has as far as the impact is that this story now is in the hands of Judith Regan, who's an expert when it comes to getting publicity out there. And that means she controls the story right now, not Rudy Giuliani, not Bernie Kerik, and certainly not News Corporation and not Fox News.
And the danger, ultimately, I suppose, in trying to analyze this, David, for Rudy Giuliani is this all could track back to the Giuliani issue, which is judgment and leadership and even 9/11, but he didn't have the slightest idea what was going on in the criminal or personal lives of his protege, Bernard Kerik. Trace that line for me, how that gets back to Giuliani.
The heart of Giuliani's candidacy, Keith, and we saw that again today in the first television ad that he's running in this campaign, is that he wants to promote the theme that because of 9/11, Rudy Giuliani has demonstrated the sort of leadership and judgment to defend America against terrorism. And there's no more important post in an administration, aside from the president, in terms of defending America from terrorism than the director of Homeland Security. And yet, there was Rudy Giuliani urging the White House to nominate Bernie Kerik, who now stands alleged as a crook. And that's the kind of judgment that certainly contradicts the main theme that Rudy Giuliani is trying to push forward. And to the extent that voters see Rudy Giuliani as somebody who puts cronyism over competence, that certainly is going to be a problem for the Giuliani campaign.
MSNBC's David Schuster. As always, David, great thanks.
Thanks, Keith.
Were it not for Rudolph Giuliani, there might not even be a Fox News channel.